There's a big difference in philosophy between my opponent and me. You trust government, I trust you.
Now Gore promises smaller government, but Gore is actually proposing 3 times the new spending President Clinton proposed. Why does Al Gore say one thing when the truth is another?
I trust you to invest some of your own Social Security money for higher returns. I trust local people to run their own schools. I trust you with some of the budget surplus. We should help people live their lives, but not run them. I'm asking for your vote.
Stand by, stand by. CNN right now is moving our earlier declaration of Florida back to the too close to call column. 25 very big electoral votes. George Bush, governor of Texas, will become the 43rd president of the United States at 18 minutes past 2 o'clock Eastern Time. CNN declares that George Walker Bush has won Florida's 25 electoral votes.
Do I look creepy enough? Hello and welcome to a recap of the first term of George Bush's presidency. We will talk about a couple of things, including his political standpoint and as vice president, and many of the things that occurred in his first year. The controversy surrounding the election came from the state of Florida due to the fact that the electoral votes had not been counted properly, and it was originally announced that Al Gore was to be the next president. When the votes were recounted, it was announced that George W. Bush was actually the next president of the United States. George Bush's vice president, Dick Cheney, attracted a lot of media attention due to his policies of domestic surveillance and overseas work with North Korea. He heavily influenced many of George W. Bush's presidential decisions. And lastly, the newly elected president helped to negotiate the Kyoto Treaty, which had many European nations cut their greenhouse gas emissions way below the 1990 levels.
And then, 9:59 a.m., a scene that will change New York for all time. The South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. And just a half hour later, at 10:28, the North Tower goes down as well. New York's Twin Towers have disappeared. It has been less than 2 hours since the first attack in New York City. An unimaginable number of people are dead and injured. The southern end of New York City's famous skyline has vanished. Nothing will ever be the same again. In a street-side news conference near the terrible devastation of the World Trade Centers, New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani said, "I have a sense it's a horrendous number of lives lost. I don't know yet. Right now, we have to focus on saving as many lives as possible."
It has been revealed that the mastermind behind the terrorist attacks of the Twin Towers and the Pentagon is Al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorist Osama bin Laden, and it seems that a war is imminent.
The U.S. invades Afghanistan.
The Taliban must act and act immediately. They will hand over the terrorists, or they will share in their fate. Our enemy is a radical network of terrorists and every government that supports them. Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda.
The Iraq War.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
The U.S. was searching for weapons of mass destruction and also removing Saddam Hussein from power in the Iraqi invasion.
Dude, I'm really sorry, Lynn.
Yeah, I know.
Another creation brought forward by George W. Bush following the attacks of 9/11 is the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. It is used to defend and plan strategies against attacks of terrorism on domestic soil. Since the terrorist attacks of 9/11, the President George W. Bush has signed into effect the Patriot Act. Amending the original bill from 2003, it expanded the search and intelligence gathering powers of the federal government on foreign and domestic soil. The final punch in the face of the terrorists from the President of the United States was the creation of Guantanamo Bay Detention Camp. It was created in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba at a naval base. Its main purpose was to detain Muslim militants and those suspected of terrorism. It also later gained media attraction due to its suspected human rights violations.
Mr. President, George W. Bush backs a proposed amendment to ban gay marriage in the United States, causing huge disruption. Though extremely very hard to implement, the No Child Left Behind Act essentially meant no child left behind in education, giving everyone the same opportunity.
These 4 years have brought moments I could not foresee and will not forget. I've learned firsthand that ordering Americans into battle is the hardest decision, even when it is right. I have returned the salute of wounded soldiers who say they were just doing their job. Because of your service and sacrifice, we are defeating the terrorists where they live and plan, and you're making America safer. I will never relent in defending America, whatever it takes.
George W. Bush beats John Kerry in the 2004 election by 35 electoral votes.
He has struck as many families in New Orleans are being affected by Hurricane Katrina. There are sticks flying through the air. Buildings have collapsed and the streets are flooded. As I look now, there's a native New Orleanian right here. Here he is.
You guys gotta help me. My home is destroyed. Everything's ruined. The government's not helping us out. Sir, please help us out.
The U.S. government proposed legislation that the NSA would be allowed to illegally go into your phone and look through all messages and internet communications. Chuck again, back from the nightly news. FEMA would propose legislation to help first responders and those injured after the 9/11 attacks, and is still intact today. Chuck E. Cheese is back here with the nightly news. Nancy Pelosi, not a huge fan of Bush, I'll tell you that. Tried to impeach him in 2004 and opposed most of his legislation. Big minorities leader too. Chuck Norris is back with a very large microphone. We murk Iraq, execute Saddam Hussein, leave their infrastructure in God knows what shape, and we don't do anything to help.